What's up, guys? Welcome back to the What's True Health podcast. Today, we've got two very special guests from the Research to Practice podcast. We've got Andrew Natoli and Emily Walker. They're both, as I mentioned, from the Research to Practice podcast that we're a very big fan of, and they're also researchers and exercise physiology researchers, as a matter of fact. So, welcome on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks
What a
for
nice
having us.
introduction. Exercise physiology researchers.
Yeah, they're
From
very
UNSW as well.
From
There you go.
That's the important bit from UNSW, right?
Exactly. So, today's topic is going to be all about research and how to get into research, what even is research, how do we navigate research, and it's something I'm still struggling with personally. I don't know about you, Henry, but I'm a bit clueless even now, 1 year in. So hopefully having some more people who've been in the space longer will be helpful. So I think the first question would be, what is your research, guys, just as an intro, and how did you get into research? How did you know that honors was something that you wanted to do? And yeah, just take it from there.
Emily, I want you to go first.
okay. Why is that? Because my story is less interesting.
Well, hey, no, everybody's story is as interesting as each other. It'd be nice to just build off of yours.
Okay. So first question was, what is my research? I might do that question after how I got into honors. So long story short, if you want the slightly longer story, you can listen to our research practice intro podcast. I go into a bit more detail there. But basically, in fourth year for us, we have the literature review subject or a research internship subject. You have to do one of them. And at the time, I had a lot of personal things going on, and I just didn't have the capacity to do the research internship because that spans over 2 terms. Some people had to go in. Basically, you join a study, and Andrew can talk about that a bit more. So I did not have the capacity for that, so I chose the literature review subject, which is just 1 term for us. And yeah, I was interested in chronic lower back pain. I don't actually remember my topic now, but it was something to do with how can we improve the management of chronic lower back pain. It was very, very, very broad. And I went through the bit of the history, what hasn't worked, what is kind of working. I went through like when clinicians are outdated or like when they have certain beliefs. I went through patient expectations and like those sorts of things. It was very, very classic, very, very broad. And I really, really enjoyed that. And I was sitting down with Andrew and we were talking about research sort of things. I was expressing, I feel really sad, I've missed out on the internship. I feel like it was a one-time opportunity sort of thing. And Andrew was like, well, why don't you just do honors? And I was like, what the fuck is that? Like, I had no idea what it was. All these like fancy university terms. And I was like, oh, I've been preparing this whole year to go into clinical practice. And mind you, this was probably August-ish time last year. So we're nearly finished our year. And yeah, Andrew just told me a little bit about it. You joined some research, and I reached out to Matt and Mitch, who are our supervisors, and I was like, if I want to do it, I'm not saying that I am going to do it. If I want to, what do you have? Like, what sort of studies or projects do you have? And yeah, obviously, I decided to do it, and it was definitely the best decision. Absolutely loving it. And that leads me to my project this year, which was basically how physiotherapists and exercise physiologists, basically what their barriers and enablers are to implementing evidence-based practice. So I ran a whole qualitative study and we just finished it. We've got our speeches tomorrow to finalize the year.
They better not be tomorrow because I'm not ready for tomorrow.
They're not tomorrow. It's Monday. You can tell. It's just, I'm so confused what day it is, man. All right.
Andrew. Right, so just quick question there, Emily. What was your original like degree? What was your degree again? Was it
exercise physiology?
So okay, cool.
Yeah.
And how much, like throughout that whole degree, what was your exposure to research in your like sort of in your learn like throughout the
Yeah.
years, is it?
Yeah, so it's 4 years. We always had it around like subjects, and I remember the first few times having to like reach out to PubMed to find some articles, but it was just I didn't know what to write in, and so many articles came out from that. And so what I typically would do is I'd write my assignment and then just find points to back it up, which is not what you should do, and not what I do now. So overall, not much. We did have a research subject in term 1 of 4th year, which actually went through like, what did it go through? Some
It was a
more
lot of like a team-based
Yeah.
thing, really, and how to work in a team to find your answers for practice and things like that.
Yeah, and like a gap in the market slash sort of literature sort of thing. So that was actually one subject for it, and then the next was research internship and literature review. So not much.
Okay, so you'd say you picked up a lot of those skills in terms of research later on in your degree and as you moved into honours.
100%. That was Andrew's influence entirely. Like I was really passionate. I found just in general things really interesting, and Andrew had some skills and background already, like before me, and looking into research. So that's when we kind of spoke, and then we decided to create a journal club, which we ran for like a decent amount of time. We did a bunch of topics. That's actually where I learned most of my research stuff. Doing that, going through papers, talking to Andrew, being like, what does this mean and how do we dissect this? So yeah, I would say Andrew.
How did you get the journal club up and running? Because I know like Victor's sent there's this, what is it, Victor? Who's in it? Like
I've been trying to set up a journal club, but it's not been successful so far.
no one replies, and it's
I'll
just
try next year, but
Yeah.
I didn't even know you guys had a journal club. That's good.
Yeah, we should start it again, and then
Yeah.
Victor and Henry can take over. But we actually were really lucky. We had a group of friends that were interested, and so it was basically like 8 of us max, and going through these topics each week, discussing them. We did make it a broader thing. We made it a page and invited people to this group. It wasn't as successful because, yeah, I think it's a bit harder when we're not posting in it, but also reaching out to people, asking for their time, and also research is not necessarily like the coolest thing up front. So yeah, it's really hard to do.
What are you talking about? Research is the coolest thing.
How's your journal club going then?
Not good. It's a single member so far.
Yeah, it's very much to do with consistency, and that's something Andrew and I don't do very well.
No, not at that time. I guess it's my turn then, is it? Yeah, I'm glad you brought the journal club in because I was like, oh, she forgot about the journal club, but no, that's great. And like also it failed for us because, it's really hard to get people amongst it, but it failed even while I had some influence at the uni because I was in the Exercise Physiology Society and I was one of the presidents of it. So like I could actually get word further out there, and even then it was hard. So keep trying, guys, and maybe we could even build something together, across the unis, who knows. But about a little bit about me and how I got into research, like I want to say the first thing that really got me into it, because I didn't really know if I was going to go clinical or going to go research route, but my own analytical mind frame, my mindset kind of pointed me down that route. And when I got the first opportunity to do the research internship, which Emily already mentioned, I jumped at it. And I've got a lot of people to thank for that actually, but first and foremost, my current supervisor, Dr. Mitchell Gibbs, I've got him to thank because he actually reached out to me, and that was after I showed some interest during 3rd year in his RCT, his powerlifting RCT on chronic low back pain. And I think he kind of saw that I was interested in the research and reached out to me and said, hey, I got a project for next year. Do you want to join? And I was like, yeah, of course I want to join. So didn't look back from there. And that was on, actually, it was originally on a paper that is now published on chronic low back pain and meeting the guidelines. It was a secondary analysis of Jill Hayden's review from 2021. But that evolved into something else where I made my own survey, which then worked into my honors. So, yeah, I don't know if I kind of explained everything good there. Did I leave any gaps? I don't even know.
Yeah, what was the survey? What was your honors?
Yeah. So I'll get to that now. Excellent. So yeah, the honors itself that I've done this year, like I said, springboarded from that survey. It was looking at the perceptions of exercise that people held when experiencing chronic lower back pain. So, everybody has beliefs and they believe certain things about exercise, but we don't actually know how people perceive those exercises, and that was important to know. And there's literally only one meta synthesis, right? So that's like a meta analysis with qual data of exactly this topic. And even that in the conclusions said there is a paucity, like a very small amount of information on this. So I was like, okay, hey, Mitch, and also Emily's main supervisor, Matt, can we keep looking into this? So we did semi-structured interviews and interviewed people about it. It was really fun.
Metasynthesis. I haven't heard that word at all.
Yeah, me neither.
I saw Victor's face get really excited when you said that word.
Yeah, I think
Oh god.
there's not much exposure to qual research. So did you pick did you want to do qual, or did you have an option at all?
That's a great question. I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to do research, and I took anything I had. The very first time they proposed a survey to me, I looked at it and I was like, oh, so this is qualitative. And I already knew what qualitative was because I had my sister do her own theses during uni, and they were both qualitative. So when I said to them, oh, is this going to be a thematic analysis? They said, yeah, it is. And then I had to learn how to do a thematic analysis because we hadn't been exposed to it at all either throughout the whole degree. Nothing was, qual related at all. So can't say that I wanted to, but I loved doing it anyway.
What about you, Emily?
I think the nature of my project, like what I wanted to look into this year, it had to be qualitative. I started first with trying to make it a survey, and I wrote up the list of questions and sent it to my supervisors, and I was like, okay, this is what I want out of the study. And they were like, that's way too in depth. Like, no one's gonna give you answers in a text box on a survey. So that's why we made it interviews. But yeah, similar to Andrew, I guess I didn't really know, but I knew what type of research I wanted to do. I just didn't know that was specifically qualitative.
Nice.
That doesn't make sense. I knew what I didn't know the type, but I knew what I mean is I knew the things that I wanted to look into, like the topic, but I didn't know that topic would have been best addressed through qualitative. That's probably a better way to say
it. Okay, cool. So yeah, my question to both of you, just bring it all back in, is sort of how much value do you see in research, and why are you guys so passionate in research? Is it something you guys genuinely love doing? Is it something why do you guys do research?
I would like to know what you mean by value.
Okay. As in how you value research?
Yeah, like you've said, how much value is there in research?
Okay. Okay. To you, how important is research in the world of health?
Right. So what sort of impacts it can make, or is it necessary? How important is it? Ooh. Do you want to say anything to that, Andrew? Do you have a jump out answer?
I have a whole bunch of things. I think it's incredibly important because it is what we base our practice on, right? Yeah. Evidence-based practice. We need some evidence to go off of, right? I mean, value-wise to me, research has so much value, just personally to me. But yeah, for within the health
Health
realm,
care.
allied health care, we need it. We need a guideline to go off of. Yeah.
That's like research in general. Then asking the question of like how much value is the research that's happening in currently for us and what has been done. That's can be another question, like a different sort of answer as well. That some research, and we're finding this is a big thing, is that it's not necessarily made for clinicians all the time, and the same things are kind of being researched. And so I'm noticing there's a bit of like a research world and who gets the money to do more research and what sort of topics that's on. So the type of research that actually is happening isn't necessarily by choice. There's things that kind of make that the way it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And
Funded
then
versus just yeah.
yeah. And then so what research could be done in the field that might be more valuable, that's another question. So yeah, as a blanket thing, yes, it's very important.
I think that's a good question, especially for students, because as we mentioned before, no one really has an interest in research at all.
Yeah.
But then realizing and asking yourself, why is research important? And I think getting that out to students, that it is the basis of your practice. It's the foundational pillars of your practice. I think that would then allow students to recognize the importance of the, yes, they should be reading papers, they should know what the current research is like. So
I think there's always a moment.
that.
Sorry, I think there's always a moment when someone realizes, sometimes it's later on, sometimes earlier in their degree or any time within their career, that they realize how important it is.
It might be
Yeah.
just the assumption that uni will teach you everything.
Mm.
And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I'm doing exercise physiology at uni, so I'm going to learn exercise physiology, but exercise physiology now, or even just health now, won't be the same in 5, 10 years. So what you're learning now isn't particularly relevant for the future. So
Not engineering or like
Yeah,
something
I
like
think
that. Or
as well, it's really important to think like to understand, well, why can't my clinical reasoning, oh, sorry, not my clinical reasoning, my clinical experience be the pillar? Why does it have to be research?
I have the answer. So one thing I'd say is fallacies. There's a lot of fallacies that can happen when you use your own experience to add evidence to a claim. So things like post hoc fallacy, just because something happened after you did the treatment doesn't mean it was the treatment. So those, yeah, just if you search up fallacies, Andrew taught me about fallacies, but all those, just yeah, look at fallacies and you see so many things and you realize, oh,
Yeah.
maybe my personal experience isn't as important. And furthermore, not having a control group to compare with makes it really hard to exclude one thing out of your treatment plan as being the cause of the effect, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Causation is hard to actually narrow down, right? So clinical reasoning through having experience can be important, but you need a basis to base that off of.
Mhm.
yeah, you need a good balance of both, sort of. Definitely.
So then what would be would there be a situation where, because to me, evidence is much more important in telling you the true cause, right? But when would your personal experience then be of value? And what comes to my head is
So
what the patient expectation sort of thing.
yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna hand
Emily's
this to Andrew.
I can see Emily smiling because she knows where my mind's at. So the first part of that whole like statement that you said as well is evidence, right? I think one really big thing is that people forget that clinical reasoning and experience is evidence for us. It's quality of the evidence, right? And do we mean literature or do we mean evidence, right? because literature can be a form of evidence, but so can like, oh, I did this to Susie over here and then this happened. That's evidence, right? It's just, when fallacies come into it, like you said, Victor, it changes things. It's like, that's the first thing. And I'm going to admit I've forgotten the rest of the question. Where was it meant to go, Em?
Is there any value in those anecdotal experiences that are lower quality, I guess? Or should we put any value because they're low quality, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Short answer, yes, right? Way more nuanced answer that'll actually be able to be used and get you somewhere is anecdotes in themselves, like single isolated events, right? They don't tell you causality of something, right? But they do give you something to go off of, and they give you context for a very specific environment and a person per se. And that's actually that's where qual data can be really important, because we understand the experience of what's happening with somebody, and then we can apply that to situations in which we see that exact thing happening again, right? So from a qual study, you're never going to be able to generalize and be like, this is what caused this. That's why we do RCTs, because they look at causation, they control for things. But if you're in the clinic and you know that, oh, when I have older clients, like above the age of 70, 80, and I tell them to pick up a barbell, they're often scared of it. So because of that, I'm going to tell them, hey, let's try a dumbbell lift from a platform. So it's not as much range of motion, doesn't look as heavy, right? There is no evidence out there, no literature to tell me people over the age of 70 don't like to lift barbells because they're heavy. But there is a lot of literature on fear avoidance behaviors. So I've taken my context of the clinical situation with my experience, right, with older clients, and the literature of fear avoidance behaviors, and put them together to get an outcome clinically, right? So that's where it becomes important.
So you're using your experiences and interactions with the patients as the value of the anecdotal experience, rather than saying this is causing this.
Yep. And then I can check in. Like I might have a client, and actually two perfect examples, a 75-year-old client, 76-year-old client, right? I had one come in, scared to lift the barbell, no problem, right? So we actually started lighter, then moved towards the barbell. After that happening, I then had a 76-year-old client, and knowing that from my past, I went and started with the dumbbell, and she did it no problem. She was like, oh, this is easy. Can we do the barbell? I said, sure, right? So I was able just to double check based on my previous experience there, right? And now I know, hey, I can just ask, how do you feel about the barbell, right? So I don't even need to waste time anymore. So it's like slowly getting to that really streamlined position.
This is gold. What do you think, Henry?
No, I think I agree with everything you're saying there. There's obviously it's based off always context of the situation, and they're not things you work with separately. You work with them together and at once, so you can sort of use what's needed in terms of your own sort of anecdotal opinion, but also limiting that to what, and also using the other side of things with that.
100%. Em, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'd say like bring it back to the point I think Victor was asking, like what's the value or what could be the value for anecdotal evidence, was it?
Yeah.
I think like asking yourself, what sort of information do I want out of this literature or evidence? So first, like the intention of what you're trying to find out or look for and why you're trying to find it out. So if, you're wanting to learn a little bit more about how people perceive something, you're not going to necessarily go to an RCT for that. Like, do you know what I mean? So there's like different literature for different reasons. And it all is really valuable and can kind of compound on each other. So bringing in, you guys know, like the hierarchy. Yeah, so we should start to dismantle that thought process and start to think about how the literature can work really well with each other. So what's an
Oh,
example?
so you're saying that the pyramid is a conspiracy?
Oof.
Depends what pyramid you're talking about. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I'm just saying that if we think about it as like RCTs are the best and we're going to learn everything from them, then you don't know what the value is of the other research and how it can also help your practice. Like if we are constantly looking at RCTs, there's a whole lot we would not know about what people think, about what people do, about different contexts, like all that sort of stuff.
Think about, and to you guys as well, Victor and Henry, think about the context of that pyramid as a whole. There is no discourse analysis on there. There is no phenomenological analysis on there. Basically, qual as a whole, right? It's not even there. Why? Because, well, they're placing their value, right, in causation. But it's not about finding what causes all the time. It's finding how can this data be helpful? Yeah. So that's why breaking it down and not worrying about the hierarchy, but rather, hey, I want to look at this study. How's that helpful to me? Oh yeah, because of this.
Yeah.
And then
What we've been taught, what we've been taught is basically like RCTs are the best. What's it called?
We've been taught a very systematic approach.
Yeah, meta-analyses, you'll get your answer straight away. And like cohort studies and like animal studies, those like lower tier ones, like we learned a little bit about them, but the way I interpret it was they're basically trash, they're low quality, we can't really rely on them.
Yeah.
So that really changes my bias, I guess, from what I've learned at uni.
So they're the best for this thing, and these are the best for this thing. So qualitative are the best for learning about people's experiences. They are not the best for generalizability. They're not the best for cause and effect. Okay, well, if that's not the best, then what can be the best? RCTs or this or that. So it's like, what is the function of that research? Why do I need it? What can it tell me? Rather than like, this is the best research. That is outdated biomedical.
Yeah. I didn't even know that was outdated.
Yeah. And like we fall into the issue of, and this is what gets meant before, like research isn't always for clinicians, it's for other researchers, for further research, because we see these RCTs and it's like, oh, the ACL, let's say ACL paper, right? They have to have no meniscus tear, no other tears of any sort, and they have to, have XYZ history and blah, blah, blah. And then clinicians see that and they go, oh, well, that doesn't apply to my client because they've also actually got a meniscus tear and have had a previous injury of blah, blah, blah. So I can't use that study, right? Because they're looking for an exact cause that fits exactly their client's presentation, right? Instead of saying, how can this be helpful to me, right?
Okay. So you're saying,
Andrew, you said,
you go, Henry.
Sorry. Yeah, you said qual studies basically they help us. What do you mean by help us? In sort of what areas do they help us? With other studies, with clinicians, that sort of stuff.
So if we've got a jam jar, imagine a jam jar, and we've got a label on it, and it tells us that it's strawberry jam. Cool. Does it tell us how sugary it is? Does it tell us how sour it is? Does it tell us if there are actual strawberry chunks in it? There's so much information. Does it tell us if it's red or they've actually dyed the strawberries blue, or that you just can't see that it's red or something because you're colorblind, whichever way it works? But does it tell us how I think it tastes? Or does it tell us how, Henry, you think it tastes? Nothing. It just tells us it's strawberry jam, and we will all assume all the other parts. So it's good to know it's strawberry jam, because it would be confusing if it had a label of lemonade juice on it. I don't know. But so quantitative is cool, gives us an understanding. Qualitative is gives us a deeper understanding of that. hopefully that helped. Otherwise,
How does
Andrew,
it
you
apply
can.
to the person?
No, that's perfect.
Is that a question?
Oh no,
Just a
I was just
summary.
adding. Yeah, I was just adding on.
Yeah.
That was beautiful, Emily. Yeah, that's it. Because the label of something, a number given to something can only tell you so much. Doesn't tell you how you're going to experience that thing.
Perfect
It's,
analogy.
it's crazy because even though I'm aware of biomedical model, biopsychosocial model, and like yes, I'm still trying to understand those. And it's just weird because something that I thought was innocent in my mind, like the evidence hierarchy, is actually not not as it's outdated and biomedical, and like I'm reflecting on how there might be more things like that and how could I pick it up later on, like you know what I mean? So things that I thought might be BPS aren't BPS, but having that understanding of, I guess, critiquing everything that you believe to be true is the only way to.
Exactly. Yeah. And if I can even just give a little critique on what you've just said as well, and also for people listening, just in case, it's not a dichotomy all the time. It's A or it's B. With the biomedical model itself, yes, it's less helpful than the biopsychosocial model, but the actual philosophical underpinning of reductionism is actually really helpful sometimes. Understanding the constituents. So just so everyone knows what reductionism is, it's breaking a complex system down to its smallest parts, its constituents, to try and figure out something about the whole system through using its constituents, right? So, classic studies of like, oh, you've got back pain. Cool. Let's have a look at your transverse abdominis and how that fires. That'll tell us more about your back pain. Obviously not the case. But in other situations, and this is more just in our clinical reasoning, if we break things down to its smaller bits, it can be more digestible for us. So it's not about like, oh, this is good, this is bad. It's like, this is good for this is good for this is bad for this, and this is bad for this. And you use them for different reasons, right? So yeah, reductionism can be helpful in itself.
I think there's two things I want to say. One, which I'll answer after, but were you asking Victor like for advice on how to,
I guess so.
like, be more critical? Okay, ask that after. This first one, I just want to note on what Andrew's saying is it's really important not to chuck biomedical out. I think specifically with pain, we've had so much biomedical research that we're realizing that it's not as important. So if you go to like another field, let's say cancer or something, then they're like, continue what you're doing. I don't really know what they do, but like that's really important for them to be reductionist in terms of like specific drugs or specific proteins or whatever. Yes, there's still going to be a person and like how they respond to treatments and things like that, but that case can be like really important to have both. And I'm not saying that one research is better than the other. We still need to know how cancer survivors experience the drug and what are the symptoms they get and what it feels like to have support and not support. Like that's just as valuable as finding a protein or drug or whatever. Hope that makes sense there. So yeah, both types of research are really important. They give you a different thing. In terms of like pain, we've done so much biomedical stuff that it is slightly more okay to say that we might not need it as much as like other types of research. And that's why we can be very heavy and be like, this is so reductionist, blah, 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 blah. It's because we keep doing the same things and seeing the same things in terms of like the type of studies that we do. Does that make sense?
So there's more. So with the cancer example, you're saying that it's kind of okay to focus a little bit more on the bio component because it's more of like a life or death situation in a way. Would that point be valid at all?
That would be like part of it. I think it's more that we're seeing how biopsychosocial pain is versus like a specific disease. Like
Okay.
health in general is biopsychosocial. I'm not saying that one's more or less, but like we're seeing now that like pain itself is not necessarily just a biological thing, whereas in cancer you could say that it's pretty biological.
Okay.
I'm not saying that other factors aren't influencing that, but yeah, Andrew, help me out. Am I making sense?
I think also there's a bit of a difference between how we do things in research versus how we do things clinically as well. So like being biopsychosocial as a clinician, you pretty much have to be, right? You're dealing with humans, you've got to be holistic. But when we talk about research, we can break things down, and we have to break things down to answer good, narrow questions, to get good answers for those questions. That's important. And I think, Victor, what you're saying with the whole, when it's life and death situation, it's okay to look at things a bit more biomedically, because you know this drug is going to do this for your cancer, therefore you have to take this drug, right? Side effects, doesn't matter. I want you to live, and I'm the doctor making that decision for you. It's very autocratic, very I'm making the decision, very this is how the chemistry works, this is how it's going to go, right? Maybe that's more what you're getting at as well. Like when you focus on that, when you're prescribing something as like a doctor. I think Emily's also talking a little bit more to like the research side of it and pain specifically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like doctors are very much biomedical in their sort of approach, whereas EPs can appreciate the more BPS model.
Yeah, and
They're
there's
not
a lot of reasons that go into that as well. Like a lot, that could be a whole podcast.
Still not an excuse to only be in the biomedical model, though. Still
Agreed.
Science.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Like if you go to extremes like a cardiologist or something like that, or like I don't know, even like cancer as well, it's the same thing. I guess it's harder to adopt the psychosocial model.
Yeah, I think in practice, always treating the human, and I was definitely referring more to research and the type of research coming out. Like we've already done heaps of research on like muscle dysfunctions and all of that sort of stuff in this space. So yeah, I think that's why it warrants moving on and seeing more things. Anyway, second thing was how do you stay critical and that sort of thing. Honestly, I would say biggest things are what you're doing. So listening to podcasts, talking to people, talking to clinicians, reaching out to other researchers, joining journal clubs, just any resources that talk about this stuff. Like Andrew, how did you start? What did you reach out to?
See, it's always interesting when people like ask me that, because I just brute forced it. Like I would just be like, oh, like how do I figure out this question? I'll just look up a million videos on it and slowly find an answer, right? Well, over time, I've realized a really quicker, nicer way to do that is to, like you said, join a journal club, right? Or go somewhere where you're almost forced to do a little bit of the work. Like sometimes a journal club will be like, oh, we got to read this paper. Cool, I got to read this paper by the 13th of whenever, because that's when journal club is. So you got a reason to do it as well, right? And like a really big thing being critical is understanding how reasoning and how informal logic can be really, really helpful, as well as formal logic. I feel like that needs to be taught a lot more. And actually, the Knowledge Exchange has a really good course on that. I don't know if you know the title of that, but it's like decoding science or something like that.
Decoding research, yeah.
Decoding research, yeah. Critical thinking skills that you learn from courses like that can be really helpful, like going to them or doing them online. I think just reading a lot more too, like self-help books, things like that will help you think more, reflect more on your life. Yeah.
Agreed. I think that's a good point to end it off on. Henry, do you have any sort of final thoughts?
I think that was great for anyone who hasn't been exposed to much research before to get that sort of insight into what you guys are doing and what got you there. It's great.
And I'm looking forward to the next geometric shape that will replace the pyramid hopefully in the next decade.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, whatever it will be.
Maybe just a circle. with all of the things inside of it to say this is all the different types of research.
Yeah,
Cool.
and they're all just everything's just an atom and they're bouncing off each other.
Yeah.
Something real abstract, like we don't even need a shape anymore because it's all conceptual. Anyway.
Amazing. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you for
guys.
coming on and taking your time.
Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day.
Yes.
But yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.